Hey everybody, Sarah here. So today we are going to be doing a book review on this very interesting book that you guys voted on my Facebook page. This is going to be definitely a doozy, but before we do that, we have to give away the book from last month, and I think it might actually be books from last month. These are the two books that we're giving away from last month. I'm giving them both away because the first one, which was this one, didn't get any comments on the video from the time that I posted it to the time that I posted the next one. So it was then passed on to the next person. Again, I can't find a hat today, so I'm putting the names in this box to draw out of. And so that next person is whoever's name I pull out of here right now, and that is Donnell James. Donnell, I hope that I'm saying your name right. So Donnell, if you're watching this, just send me an email. It's in the description below with your preferred shipping address, and I will send both of these books to you free of charge as long as you're in the US. If you're outside the US, I may just need you to pay for shipping. Alright, before we jump into reviewing this book, I also want to thank everybody who's here, everybody who's already liked and subscribed. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and if you like this video and this kind of content, liking, sharing, and that kind of stuff really helps this channel. I also want to thank all of our members. I actually do have the list in front of me today, so thank you Beta Zero Sept for being our newest member, who actually just joined 0 days ago as of the time I'm looking at this, so thank you for being our newest member. We have Frankie, Ember, Donnell, Sarah L, Kel, I think, just Kel, Grace, Montesaurus Rex, Zoe, Casey, Jelly Dots, Melissa, Raul, Blacktongue, Amy, Bridget, William, Robert, Other Amy, and April. You guys are amazing. We're up to 20 members now. That is so cool. Thank you guys so much for being members and for being here. You guys are awesome, and you really make this channel what it is, especially this series specifically, because any of the membership money that is ever deposited into my account goes straight back to buying more Corn Snake books, and we are on no shortage of Corn Snake books. We still have, I just bought like 4 or 5 more, and I still have a box behind me that also has another 4 or 5, and there's still way more out there that I haven't purchased. So thank you guys so much for being the reason that we can actually do this review series on this channel, because there are some great books out there, but there's also some not so great ones, and we'll get into that. I also want to thank Reptilinks really quick for supporting this channel financially as well. If you want to use my code at checkout, it is SarahSnake27. It gets you $5 off, and it also gets me a little bit of that money as well, and that of course goes back into the channel. Reptilinks has the links, but they also have some other frozen prey, so if you are wanting links but you don't just want to buy links, they have other options on there as well, and a $100 money back guarantee. So if you put in an order and the links do not work for you, they will refund that $100 for you. I also want to mention an awesome announcement. I'm going to be at the NARBC Tinley show tomorrow. It'll be tomorrow as of the time this video goes out. Tomorrow and the next day, I'm just going to visit, and I'll probably only be there for a couple of hours each day. My husband and I will be there. We will be wearing the tie-dye Corn Snake shirts that I've been selling on my website. I don't know if you can tell, I've colored my hair like a purple and teal-ish a little bit. So if you are there and you are looking for me, look for the person with the tie-dye t-shirt and the teal and purple hair. That's me. Also, again, check out my website if you do want to get a tie-dye t-shirt. I custom tie-dye these t-shirts myself, so I can do any color that you want. I actually just bought a whole new tie-dye kit with a bunch of new colors in it, so please check that out as well as other things on my website. It has been long enough. Now I'm going to actually jump into going over this book. So there's 3 criteria that we judge these books on. The 3 criteria are: how good is the information in the book? How easy is it to read from an English speaker's perspective? And is it as advertised? If it says it's the complete guide, which this says, the complete guide for caring for corn snakes. So because it's the complete guide, we're going to be judging it as if it was a complete guide, and I can tell you right now, you see the size of that font, and there's only like 30 pages in this book. We're probably not going to hit that complete guide mark, but let's go over some of that now. So first we're going to start with how accurate is the information in this book, and I'm not going to go over all the details. I will do that at the end of the video. I mean, there's a lot of glaring errors in it. For example, at one point they start talking about probing. That was probably the biggest heck no, do not, this is not correct information that I've ever seen about probing in my life. I am just going to read this very brief excerpt of about probing. Probing should never be performed by anyone other than a trained veterinarian with a long history of medical care of snakes and lizards. Okay, sure. I mean, I would say maybe breeders, like experienced breeders, are also like in the category of people who could do that, like myself. I've been doing this for 12 years. I have been breeding corn snakes for 12 years. I've been able to tell the sex of my corn snakes for 12 years. So I would consider myself, even though I'm not a veterinarian, pretty much a professional in that area. But then it also says, probing is the process of forcing open the snake's opening, I cannot say that word, and pulling out the lizard's sex organs, and then replacing them inside the opening. Now, I don't know about you, but lately, I haven't found any, like, lizard genitalia inside of my snakes. But, like, if that's a common problem, I think you might have more going on than just, like a probing issue. Probing is actually, I did it up in this video. I'll link it up for you guys if you'd like to see it. Probing is you get kind of these long, thin metal rods that have like a little ball on the end. I prefer the ones that have the ball in the end because they don't actually, they have a less likely chance of harming the snake. And yes, you should be trained before you do this, but you just simply insert it into the tail through the opening, and if it only goes in a little bit, you have a female. If it goes in a little bit, if it goes in kind of long, you have a male. It's a little bit invasive, but it's not harmful, especially if you do it correctly, and especially if you have proper lubrication. And generally speaking, it's actually one of the easiest ways to learn how to sex adult snakes. Popping is another option. They said that probing and just looking at the snake were the only ways to sex them. That's another thing. Again, it's less invasive and it doesn't hurt them if you do it correctly. Would have been better if they didn't put this information in, then put it in. There's just a lot. There's a lot in here that I really did not like. Now, they did have a lot of good information, but when you kind of have to gather all the information up and cut it in half, and on one side you have half of the information is good and half of the information is like really bad, you really I cannot in good conscience give this a good score, because this is sort of in the realm of what I kind of recommend the information in this book, and I'm sorry, I don't. I'm really not trying to be rude about this, like this person in particular. Of course, I don't have their name on the cover. Tabatha Jones is the person who wrote it, and at the very end of the book, they're like, we plan to make other care guides. And I'm like, please don't. Please do not. If you are telling people to pull out like a lizard's genitals from a snake's body in order to sex the snake, please do not. Just please don't. Do not, and please do not call it the complete guide, because there's nothing in here about caring for females that might have been egg bound even though they aren't exposed to a male. There's nothing in here about actually the brumation process or how to do that. It mentions brumation and that brumation is a thing, but it acts like snakes are just going to go into brumation by themselves. They're just gonna go into brumation, and that's not how it works. There's a lot of other big things in here, and again, I'll go over them at the end of the video in more detail. But I'm gonna have to give this like a 2 out of 10 in that category, because I honestly, I'm sorry, I cannot recommend the majority of the information in this book. All right, we're gonna move on to how good is the writing, or how easy is it to understand based on an English speaker's perspective. This is where I pretty much look at the grammar and all of that stuff. It is laid out pretty simply. It is easy to read for the most part. There are some like grammatical errors in it. Sometimes they spelled a word wrong, or they used the wrong tense of a word, or they would put multiple like punctuations at the end of a sentence, like there was an exclamation point and a period at the end of one of the sentences. So there were a lot of like glaring errors that I think that if they just had somebody give it a look over, like I, as of like 2 hours ago, was frantically wondering how I was going to get everything done, like read this book and record this video today. But I sat down and read it in like 20 minutes, maybe less. And so literally if someone had just, if they had just said to someone, hey, I will pay you $20 an hour, which if they only took a half hour, that's only $10, but I'll pay you $20 an hour to just read through this book and look for like just grammar errors, nothing else, just grammar and punctuation, like basic spelling. They could have like fixed that before publishing, but they didn't. They did not do that, and I don't even think that they read it back after they typed it up the first time. So as far as like how good is the writing, I'm gonna give it a like 5 out of 10 because it's like not terrible. It's not the worst. Like we've obviously seen much worse books in this series, but there's a lot of glaring errors that really could have been fixed very easily. All right, now we're moving on to the final section, which is this book as advertised? And the answer is heck no, absolutely not. It is not as advertised. This says the complete guide to caring for and keeping corn snakes as pets. Aside from, like, let's just take the information in here that is correct. And let's even assume that all of the information given in this book is correct, even though it's not. Even if we assume that everything in here is correct, it's not complete by a long shot. And again, I'll go over it. And of course, we could probably figure that by how tiny the book is and how like giant the font is. If we compare this to something like Kathy Love's book, which again, I've already said is a 10 out of 10. I almost don't even need to review it. So this is Kathy Love's main book. Kathy and Bill Love, I believe. Yeah, Kathy and Bill both chipped in to write this. And you can see how big it is, how small the font is. This book is 227 pages, and it covers. I mean, this is a complete guide. This is what I expect out of a complete corn snake guide. And even if you just take out the breeding part and you only stick with care, the breeding part of this book is maybe a third of the book, maybe not even that much. There's no morph information in here, which I understand is not related to care, so I'm not going to like dock it for not having morph information. I'm not going to dock it for not having breeding information, but some of these things are a part of their care. For example, albinos need less UV, in fact, maybe very little UV, because if they are exposed to UV too much for too long, or even as much as a normal corn snake would be, it can cause them to go blind and it can cause other health problems. So talking about morphs in that context is probably worth doing. And even though we're not talking about breeding, again, I mentioned there are females that lay eggs or become egg bound even without a male around. I had 2 females this year that were only 2 years old and they were never exposed to a male, and they both just laid slug eggs this year. And one of them needed a little bit of intervention. It wasn't bad, but it does happen, and so something like that would also be really useful in this book. So is it as advertised as the complete care guide for corn snakes? I would say, again, maybe 3 out of 10 on that. And I hate to give this book low, like super low scores like that, but honestly, I cannot recommend this book. So after we average the scores of 2, 5, and 3 out of 10, we end up with very close to a 3 out of 10. It's like 3.333. So the average score for this is a 3 out of 10, which I think is reasonable. I think that that's actually perfectly fair given everything that's going on in this book or not going on in this book. So that is my final score, but if you want to stick around, I will go over more detail now. If you don't want to stick around, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and all that stuff. Check out Reptilinks on my website. I'm moving on now. Alright, so first thing I want to mention is this book was published in 2019. So there's really no excuse for this book to not have good information in it. And especially when it comes to the sexing portion in this book, I want to mention that they say that looking at the snake's tail taper and probing are the only 2 ways to sex a snake. That's definitely not true. We obviously have the popping method. I prefer that only for younger snakes, maybe up to yearlings, but that's just because of my hand size and my comfort level personally. But people can pop adult snakes. It is possible. And also there's DNA sexing now. And I will put a link down below with the information where you can have that done. You just send in a shed skin. It's pretty cheap. I think it's like maybe $20 or something. That is also an option that is very non-invasive, and you don't really run any risk to your snake by doing it that way. So I'm starting at the top. Here's a positive. The introduction pretty much says, like, it's important to know everything about your pet before you buy a pet. Make sure that you know how long they're going to live and that you can care for them that long. All that stuff. I think that that's really good advice. I think it's really good to start a book out like that, so that's a positive. That's one of the main reasons that this book isn't a 1 out of 10. One thing that I want to mention is on the very first page, they say that male corn snakes are smaller than females on average, which is the opposite of what you see in a lot of other care guides. And I believe the reason for this, honestly, is because I think that they're the same size. A lot of people want to think that there's a gender discrepancy in size, but I have not noticed that in my collection really at all. I have noticed that males tend to get a bit bigger, but only because the females lay eggs and they expend a lot more energy doing that, and so they don't spend as much of their food energy growing their own bodies, where they do spend it growing babies. So one thing that I thought was interesting and made me say, has this person ever owned a corn snake, was this sentence right here. Despite being large in size, they are easy to handle due to their tendency to move slowly. I have no idea what they could possibly be talking about, because anyone who's ever had a corn snake, especially a corn snake that they were trying to get a good picture of, knows that this is not true. They do not sit still. I believe that this book was a template for maybe also ball pythons and lizards as well, because they talked about how probing, you expose a lizard's genitals, and I'm like, why are we talking about lizards in this book? This is not a lizard book. I would understand maybe comparing to different types of snakes, but this is not a lizard book. So I'm wondering if they had written a lizard version of this book and they just forgot to edit that part out. And same thing with this, maybe they had a ball python or a boa constrictor book as well, and they just forgot to take out this despite their large size and they move slowly type of thing, because that is not a corn snake. That is the opposite of a corn snake. If you're looking for a large snake that is slow, a corn snake is not for you. They also say that if you have multiple together, that one of the snakes is going to dominate the food source. And that's specifically in the Can Corn Snakes Be Housed Together section. And I'm concerned if this person is housing corn snakes together and a larger corn snake is dominating a food source, I am genuinely concerned how they're feeding their snakes. Because you should not just be throwing a bunch of food in an enclosure just to see what eats it. I don't recommend ever housing together, but if you do, I definitely 100% recommend taking your snakes out of their main vivarium, putting them in a separate enclosure, feeding them completely separately before returning them to that vivarium. I don't know in what universe a food source domination is going to be an issue for anyone who's taking any good care of their snakes, and if that's how this person is doing this, they definitely should not be writing a book about it. I'm honestly annoyed that I spent money on this book. It was only $5, but I want my $5 back. It also says that a hatchling corn snake can eat small mice, and I'm sure that they meant pinky mice. I'm sure that they meant pinky mice. I'm not sure that they meant that, because again, they could be carrying over this information from a ball python or boa constrictor book that they had written before this, or who knows what else. And so they're probably thinking, I'm not sure this person has ever owned a corn snake before. I'll be completely honest. Especially with the things that they're saying. It's best practice to feed your hatchling corn snake small mice every 5 to 7 days. The mouse would eat the snake. Please don't get a small adult mouse to feed your baby corn snake. You need to get newly born baby tiny itty bitty hairless pinky mice for your baby corn snake. Please do not get a small adult mouse. Now there's also this whole section on do not feed your snake live prey ever. I don't agree with this, and this is another part where they had an opportunity to talk about the care of a baby corn snake, where sometimes if you have a trouble feeding baby corn snake, it is good to try to feed them a live pinky mouse. Sometimes they will only respond to a heartbeat, and that just is how it is. And I understand what they're trying to say here. You don't want to feed your snake anything that might actually hurt the snake. And so I do, of course, recommend frozen thawed over anything else, or at least pre-killed, where you get it, you euthanize it, but while the body's still warm, then you feed it to the snake. I know it's gross, but it's all part of it. But to sit there and say never, ever feed any of your snakes alive, I think that that's a little naive, to be completely honest. There's also a section on here in housing where it says that if the lid of your enclosure doesn't fit right, pile thin books on it. Don't do that. Do not do that. Absolutely don't do that. If you have an enclosure and the lid doesn't fit right, either buy a better lid or buy clamps that can clamp the lid down. They specifically make clamps for this. It is your responsibility as an owner to make sure that you are purchasing the correct things for your snake, and that includes an enclosure, which includes some type of latch that the snake is not going to be able to get out of. So whether it's a front opening, top opening, whatever, make sure that you are doing it correctly, and piling books on top of it is not the way to do it correctly. Also in here, they recommend that if you bring any wood in from outside to put in your enclosure, to clean it with a chlorine water mixture. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Do not, under any circumstance, put any chemicals on anything made of wood that's going to go in your enclosure. I don't care what the chemical is. The way to do wood is to keep it in the oven to kill parasites. I'm not going to go over like details on how to do that right now, but do not ever put chemicals on anything that is made of wood. The wood will absorb the chemicals and they will slowly release back into like your snake's enclosure. So like just don't ever use bleach or chlorine or any kind of like chemical on wood that you're putting in your snake's enclosure. It's just a bad idea. This book is frustrating me so much. It's like they're recommending the exact wrong thing for a lot of this, and I'm going crazy here. I will say that they did a pretty good job of covering the different type of substrates and the different type of heating and lighting for enclosures. I did like that. That's like basically the main reason that this book did not like get a 0 in this, is because there is some good information. It's just sparse. It's just sparse. And they also keep saying to like buy a thermometer and just keep checking your thermometer. Just keep checking your thermometer. Check your thermometer daily. Just get a thermostat. Problem solved. 100% solved. Get a thermostat. They're cheap. They're like 20, maybe 30 bucks. And they last a long time, and they will keep the temperature how you want it to stay. Now, there's one other thing that I want to mention, and that is they talk about stargazing in here. The whole information is wrong. And this is again why I think that maybe this was a boa constrictor book before, because this is stargazing in like boas and pythons. Pretty much they say that if your snake is like looking up at the ceiling, that it's a sign of this stargazing neurological disease condition thing, which is a problem with boids, but it's not a problem with colubrids, at least not corn snakes, not in that way. We do have a stargazer mutation, but it is a recessive mutation that has been bred out of the majority of people's collections. In fact, I think it's pretty much eradicated now. I haven't seen anybody have any issues with stargazer for at least 5 years. I don't even think I've ever physically seen a stargazer myself, maybe one time. But they're just not that common. And to put the stargazing like disease information in a corn snake book is causing undue panic. And again, that's why this book did not get a high score. And that's pretty much going to be all that I have to say about this book. I'm sorry that this video was so long, but thank you guys so much for being here and watching it. Comment below if you would like to win a free copy of this book. We can laugh at it together. And if you don't want it, just say in your comment like, hey, I don't want the book, but here's my comment. That's also fine. I cannot put your name in there. I hope that you found this informative. I don't recommend this person's books. I mean, I don't know anything about the rest of their books, but if the rest of their books are anything like this, unfortunately, I can't recommend Tabatha Jones. I would say probably just don't. If any of the other books are like this one, it seems like they just don't. I just don't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Tabitha, but this is not. You should not have published this book. This book should not have been published. But it gets a 3 out of 10. I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.